Okay, today's topic. Now, Preacher's not here right now because he's out living his best life. He's traveling at the moment. So I figured I would just do this real quick, and then if there's follow-ups to be done, we will. As far as the verdict goes, people really kept asking me about my thoughts about the trial. Now the verdict is in.
The defendant will rise and face the jury and hearken to its verdicts.
State of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
Members of the jury, are these your unanimous verdicts? Is there anyone who does not agree with the verdicts as read? Would you wish the jury polled? No. Okay. Okay, folks, your job is done, and we started just about 3 weeks ago. And I told you it could last 2 weeks and 2 days. This is 2 weeks. This is 3 weeks. You were a wonderful jury to work with. You were punctual. You were attentive.
It is what I expected to happen. All they really have to do in this case is get reasonable doubt. And if you looked at all the facts of the case, you watched the video footage, the testimonies. I mean, the moment the guy got up on the stand and said, listen, he only shot me when I pointed my gun at him, it's like, bruh.
Now, the state claimed that Grosskreutz did not pose a threat to Rittenhouse when he confronted him in the street, that he even had his hands up at one point. But he did have a pistol in one of those hands, and the defense proved that got Grosskreutz to admit that Rittenhouse did not fire at him until he lowered his hands and pointed the gun.
It sounded like gunshots.
Gage Grosskreutz heard the first shooting.
It sounds like multiple gunshots.
And shortly after, he became a part of the second shooting scene.
You shot somebody? Who shot? Who shot?
Eyewitness video from the scene shows as more people approached Kyle Rittenhouse, he was knocked to the ground. Grosskreutz was roughly 5 feet away with his Glock pistol in his right hand and his cell phone in his left. At first, his hands were raised.
What was going through your mind at this particular moment?
That I was gonna die.
But on cross-examination, the defense went through the video again, at times second by second.
When you were standing 3 to 5 feet from him with your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him, advanced on him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him, that he fired, right?
Correct.
There was an abundance of reasonable doubt involved in this. And so for me, watching the case unfold, looking at the testimonies, I'm like, yeah, this is what I expected to happen. And once the jury took more than a day to come back from deliberations, in my mind, it was pretty clear that he was going to get off. Because when your goal is reasonable doubt and the jury's taking that long deliberation, clearly there's a lot of doubt cemented and they're asking a bunch of questions. So just from my personal anecdotal experience watching a high-profile case, when it takes a long, long time, generally the person's going to be going free on the most serious charges. And in this case, he was acquitted of all charges. Now, people ask me, do I think he should be guilty? From a legal standpoint, no, not at all. Watching the details of the case, I'm like, I don't think so. From a moral standpoint, I think it's a bit different. You can look at his behavior as reckless, extremely dangerous, antagonizing. You can look at it a lot of different ways, and I'm not going to lecture to everybody about what they should or shouldn't think about that. What I do think is really unfortunate, me watching this from afar and paying attention to this, is how everybody frames this from a political angle. Right? If you're left-leaning, he's a vigilante, stalker, killer, dangerous person. And if you're right-leaning, a lot of people say he's a fucking hero. It's like, bro, can we slot it in between? You know what I'm saying? Can we find a bit of a middle ground without having to politicize the whole thing? Because it feels as though when people go through these lengths to misrepresent the facts of what happened, to characterize this person in things that are not yet justified, they rile people up. It gets people very aggravated. People get their pitchforks, they put their lines in the sand, and they pick their team. And so based off whatever team you are, he's either guilty or he's innocent, rather than just looking at what actually happened. And I think that's the most unfortunate part for me watching this. It made me think of that case a while back where a cop was called and this girl was trying to like stab somebody else, and the cop shot the young black woman, and then everybody lost their minds. And I'm like, but that's what the cop is supposed to do. If someone's brandishing a knife, look, this is just me. If it's my daughter, okay, and she's about to get stabbed, you best believe I want the cop to shoot the person who's about to stab her. But people have like this anti-police slant so hard that all logic just goes out the window when it comes to these kind of things. And for me watching, it's just unfortunate because I'm like, bruv, you know damn well if it's your daughter in that situation or your family member who's about to get stabbed, you want the police officer to act. You feel me? So that's what I think this case demonstrated. Like, the particulars of the case are not that interesting. Once you realize a certain set of facts, you're like, all right, well, this is pretty obviously going to be self-defense. Like, you know, there's nothing that can really convince me that beyond a reasonable doubt that this man is guilty, right? So that part didn't interest me. It's everything surrounding it, like the media's pressure and like just individuals just getting on top and be like, white supremacy. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? So now, dude, all the riling up, I don't know if there's going to be more riots and more looting or burning. And if there is, like, you know, at some point, maybe this is just me. We have to find a better way to deal with this stuff rather than just burning the local mom and pop shops and the local spots around. Like, I don't know. To me, it just doesn't seem sensible to continuously do that. Someone asked me too. They said, but do you think he was fake crying? I mean, that man is an ugly crier. And so if he faked it, his acting skills at 17 are superb. But again, it feels like people want to characterize everything based off of where they lean politically. If you went online, right, and you went to any media celebrity who commented on this or any YouTube personality, if you just looked at how they leaned politically, that was going to infer what they thought the verdict should be, right? Whether or not they watched the video, whether or not they followed the trial, whether or not they watched the witness testimonies, if you just knew how they leaned politically, you knew where they were going to say pretty much 95% of the time. And I think that's what the conversation should be focused on, because I think that's what created all this public pressure for this to even be prosecuted, for all this to even happen. And I think that's also fueling a lot of our divide. So I think that's pretty much summarizes my thoughts on this. I'm worried that, you know, there's going to be more fires and more violence that's going to stem from this. And even though I think the right verdict was rendered, the wounds that we are still dealing with are still very much present.